Welcome back to Family Twist. I'm Kendall,
And I'm Corey.
and today we're going to talk about a recent family trip that I went on.
This is actually kind of a follow up to an episode we did 3 years ago called The Man Weekend, which was about the interesting experiences of Kendall's birth family's family property.
It's my father's family, and for listeners who haven't heard, my dad's family stayed in New England after I was born, and my grandparents, actually, the year I was born, bought property up in really northern New Hampshire, kind of up by Canada, and it's still in our family. And for years and years, my dad and his brother would take their kids, their male children. I know that sounds sexist. It's just something that the girls didn't want to do. And the male kids went up, and then it evolved into friends of the family ended up going. And so since Corey and I have lived here in New England, I've been up there several times, and it's a lot of fun. It's really cool for me to get to hang out with family that I didn't know when I was a child and kind of get to experience what it would have been like to go and sit around campfires and be with my biological family.
So a couple of years ago, I went up there really just to meet one of Kendall's cousins for the first time because we've got a bunch of critters here and it's tough for us both to be away at the same time. So I drove, it's like a 2 hour drive up there to hang out and meet him and see a little bit of the shenanigans going on and then headed back. But I got to say, it was like, I didn't feel bad that I wasn't staying over because rustic would be a very kind word to use. Now, they made some changes to the property, but we're talking about an outhouse, a basement structure with a floor and a roof over it. So at least you had a roof over your head, and that's about it. They got to clear
Yeah.
the brush out of there every time they visit.
And really be careful about poison ivy because it's not a yard per se. This is just woods that have been cleared. But it's lovely. It's right by a lake, and get to go to a river. It is beautiful, but my grandparents never turned it into what they hoped it would be. They did put in electricity, and the thought was that they would eventually put in running water. There is water now, but only during this last trip did we figure out how to make that happen. So, which is kind of just a fun part of the experience anyway, just watching us all fumbling our way through doing that. But it was a lot of fun. This time it was my uncle and his two sons, so my two cousins. And on my father's side, I only have three cousins. So the only cousin who wasn't there is my cousin Rachel, who didn't come up. And when I say come up, all three of those guys, my uncle and my two cousins, have moved to the South. So it's a concerted effort for them to, come and make this happen. I felt badly that they kind of didn't have more time because both of my cousins, Justin and Jamie, they needed to get back to work and, they have lives going on, and I get it. But I was so happy that they made the effort, and it was great to see them. It just, it's an interesting thing because when I'm sitting there, it makes me realize what I missed by not having these people in my lives for all these years, but also it makes me also remember what I did have growing up and how close I was to my adoptive cousins. And it's all good, it's all wonderful because I'm not close to my adoptive cousins anymore. I mean, when I say close, I mean not physically close to anyone. And so it's difficult. I don't get the opportunity to go and hang out with people the way that I did when I was a child or a teenager. It's so cool to get to hang out with my uncle and my cousins. And then we had a really good friend, Pete. He goes as often as he can as well. And he was there as well. And my brother, Chris, who has been a guest on this podcast and is really the very first person I ever connected with in my biological family. So it was really special. And then this was the first time that Chris's two sons came and were involved. Well, one of them is already an adult and one of them is just turned 17. So, I'm glad that my brother and his wife thought it was going to be an appropriate time to let those boys come, because we all just had such a great time. And we were all, so we went up on Friday and we left on Sunday, and Saturday morning I joked and said, is everybody else hoarse from laughing? We laughed so much on Friday night that I was having a difficult time speaking on Saturday morning.
A couple of quick sidebars. So one, I thought it was really cool that Kendall's nephews were there as well because, some days it doesn't seem like it's been that long since we found them. And some days, it does. But then you just look at, you think about the first time we met them, they were little kids. When we
Mhm.
met them at the airport, when they picked us up for that very first visit before we moved here.
In 2017.
And to think of them now as practically adults is just surreal.
Yeah.
But it has been great at least being here and seeing them grow up. 2 years ago, we attended Kendall's niece's graduation party. So Pete was there with his wife, and I made a dish, as I always like to do when we're, going to some kind of a family event. And so I did these Asian style meatballs, and we're sitting down to eat with Pete and his wife, and Pete's got some meatballs on his plate. And he's like, wow, these are really good. He goes, by chance, there's no sesame in this? And I said, oh, yeah, they're coated in sesame oil. Well, Pete has a very serious sesame allergy. And I think he thought because they were meatballs, like Italian style meatballs, that, why would they have sesame in them? But they were loaded up with sesame. So, he started getting hives immediately. And thank goodness there was an EMT there that was able to kind of help him get through it, because he didn't have an EpiPen with him or anything like that. But now, we can joke about it because he's okay.
Yeah. They all kind of teased me about the time that, they lumped me in with Corey, even though I never cook, and said, remember the time when Corey and Kendall tried to kill Pete at Mia's party? I'm glad Pete has a good sense of humor about it. But yeah, that was just one of the examples of how we joke and tease each other and everything. It was a lot of fun.
So we'll put the link to the episode in the show notes, but that original Man Weekend episode actually was not recorded up at the family property. It was recorded up at the Cape, where Kendall's uncle Sean had a house that the kids grew up in. And it was kind of like the last hurrah party there before he sold it. And I thought it was a good opportunity to get a little bit of the feedback of what it was like for Kendall to be in this interesting situation of the Man Weekend, this very rustic, camping situation, because when Kendall and I would go camping with my family, it was much closer to glamping than it was, like this. And so it was just kind of funny to hear the stories. There was a lot of laughter going on at that night too. So there was, a lot of imbibing and shenanigans going on. So I can only imagine how that transfers to the Man Weekend when you guys are out there in the woods.
Yeah, it's, silliness and, just like I said, laughing and telling stories. I mean, I love to hear the stories that Uncle Sean and Justin and Jamie and Chris, my brother, would tell about, growing up and visiting that property and the things that happened there, so really interesting.
One of the things that Kendall really remarked on when he got back was that he had a really in-depth, long conversation with his nephew, Nolan, who is going to be a senior in high school this year. And so he's getting ready for the future. He's a musician. And so, we love music. So they got to talk about that. And yeah, it's just been really cool. When the kids were younger, we tried to relate to them, play video games with them and things like that. But now that they're adult age, it's just kind of really fun to talk to them about more adult things. We just went to the beach a couple of weeks ago with Chris and Karen and Shane, and it was just great talking with Shane about okay, what are your plans for the future? And he just pledged fraternity this year, and he's really excited about that. And just to see these kids become awesome adults it's definitely been one of the highlights of this journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I felt like, when kids are kids, they're not always the most inquisitive, right? Or they don't know what to ask you. And so I feel like up until this trip, that my two nephews didn't get to know me as well as they did during this trip. I mean, we talked about my past more than we ever had before. And I could tell that they were genuinely interested and they love having an uncle that they can hang out with. Not that they don't have, they have a really cool Uncle Matt on their mother's side, whom they love. But, I'm their dad's brother that they never knew until 8 years ago. And we are making the most of the time that we can.
Yeah, and I think they made some upgrades this time around. Chris helped Uncle Sean find a camper to go onto the site. And so, not everybody had to sleep in tents necessarily this time. And it seemed like it was a pretty comfortable situation for everybody. And like Kendall said, they got the water hooked up now. And there are plans to actually finish a house on that property. So it's because it was kind of sad when we were thinking about, Uncle Sean moving and like, is he going to sell the property? Is it, it's going away? And to think that it's going to have this special place for Kendall's family is, still going to be there and within the family. I know it's going to be used, time and time again. Like this wasn't the last trip you took.
At the end of this trip, we were already all talking about next year. And sometimes when in the past, when they've talked about future trips, it was almost like, well, it'd be great to do it every year, but it'll probably be every 2 years. Well, this time I think, and I think I credit my nephews, I think because the young guys were there, they were like, let's do this every year. And I think everybody kind of felt committed to that plan. And again, I give a lot of credit to Uncle Sean, Jamie, and Justin because they've got quite some distance to come, So I know we all appreciated that from them.
We know this was just kind of a down and dirty quick episode, but we wanted to capture it for posterity's sake because this is definitely going to be one of the things that Kendall remembers, for the rest of his life. The finding the birth family journey, is getting to go on these weekends with, his brother and nephews and cousins and uncle. It's pretty special.
It is. And, you know, selfishly, I'm glad that I'm not one of the people that has to fly in and fly out so quickly because, it's only a couple of hours for Chris and for me and for Pete. So, I felt a little spoiled, like it's really easy for us to get up there, but it's still effort. It's still like herding cats to get us all in the same place at the same time. But we were all committed. And thanks to all you guys. If you're listening, it was a blast. And I can't wait till next year.
Something we're going to experiment with pretty soon is just some solo episodes of Kendall and I kind of talking about discussing issues that are going on within the communities, the NPE, adoptees, and donor conceived communities. As I think I've mentioned on the show, I was honored to be asked to join the board of directors for the Right to Know nonprofit, and I'm currently helping them plan next year's Untangling Our Roots Summit. And so as we both become deeper within the community, we feel like it's appropriate for us to talk about things that are happening currently with legislation and, other things that are happening within the communities right now.
We want to bring to light issues that we know our listeners are concerned about. And we feel like this is a perfect platform to do that because we feel like if you're listening to us and you're enthralled by the stories that we tell or have told to us, then you're the perfect people to hear the concerns of others in the community.
So that said, if there are specific topics that you'd love to hear us discuss, feel free to send us an email, ping us on Instagram, wherever you can find us, because we'd love to talk about it. And what really made me think about that today was we just got a really, really sweet email from somebody who found our podcast and listened to it and knew that their dad wasn't their dad. And they were going back and forth about, do I really want to find out? Do I want to take the test? And after listening to episodes of Family Twist, decided to take the test and reached out to thank us. And they want to tell their story on the show. And they're going to very soon. So that was like, when something like that happens, it just makes this all worthwhile. Like, we started off really just to tell Kendall's story and to be able to share so many other stories and get involved with the community and talk about issues that are, happening. It's just it's the icing on the cake.
It is, and, I hear people we talk to people who say, that their stories don't have happy endings, and I get it, I totally get it. I feel like mine is a mixed bag because I've had such positive experiences, but the overarching negative experience is that my birth mother has never spoken to me. But for me, even if no one in my family ever was close to me in my biological family, I still think I needed the closure that getting your results and finding family members bring. I need that. I didn't know I needed it. And so I just urge everyone to learn the truth. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's hard to deal with, but I think for most people, it just seems like it does, even when the situations aren't great and you learn horrible things that you wish you didn't know about your biological family sometimes. I think the closure, completing the circle really matters a lot.
Yeah, having those open-ended questions out there and having no idea the answers, I'm sure we know how frustrating it was because that's something that we went through together, for the first big chunk of our relationship.
Absolutely. And you can't always take care of all the physical things that you learn about your biological family, but I am glad to know that I have a high likelihood of getting skin cancer. I'm already frightened about that, and I've already had a few little spots burned off my skin that were pre-cancerous. So again, that is something probably every middle-aged person should be concerned about. I didn't realize to the extent that I should have been concerned. And so those kinds of things have been helpful too.
Absolutely. So, well, as always, we really appreciate the listeners and, you've been great. You offer some great feedback and constructive criticism, and please keep it coming.
Exactly. And even if you don't have a story to tell yourself, please, urge your friends and colleagues to reach out to us because by word of mouth, we found such wonderful guests.
Right. And every time somebody comes on and tells their story, I think it helps somebody else on the other end. All right. Until next time, thanks for joining us on Family Twist.